The work of iReady is going to put students on a path toward personalized instruction. And when you are personalizing instruction, then you are absolutely going to take the steps necessary to get the maximum potential for that student. And so with everything that you're doing instructionally and guiding with assessment, which is the whole purpose of iReady, is informing instruction the entire time. If an intervention is necessary, how do I intervene? Giving you the tools very, very easily, the power of subgrouping your classroom so that you don't have to think about that, the interventions, the resources that you need to intervene. And so really guiding around that personalized kind of process.
Well, welcome back to the show, and we're very excited this afternoon to be able to visit with Dr. Elda Garcia. I know that she's a dynamic leader in the things that she's done within, I believe, Corpus Christi and a lot of different things, and the impact now that she's having nationally. So very excited to know about you. So our listeners are really wanting to know. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Elda Garcia, and your path to your career and where you are right now.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It really is a pleasure to kind of spend the time and just kind of reflect on what my leadership my leadership journey has been.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in charge of assessment and accountability for about almost 20 years in Corpus Christi, for Corpus Christi ISD, which is where kind of my initial work in assessment came, and my support for my fellow educators across the district. And so in that time, in that span of time, I really had an opportunity to really work with a number of different departments. So I became completely unplanned, but I became kind of a very knowledgeable in multiple areas. Worked closely with technology, curriculum instruction, special education, basically every area kind of bled into my work in assessment. So we ended up being kind of like the hub of all things. So it allowed me to get very, very savvy in a number of areas. And so I became very active in the assessment world, in the assessment space within my region in Corpus Christi and Region 2, and then ultimately at the state level. So Texas is one of the few states that is fortunate enough to have an assessment network that's dedicated to testing coordinators. It's called TSNAP. And so I became regional director of that organization and ultimately president. And so that's really, I think, what inspired me to help other states do the same. So I lifted that effort to the national level, and then launched my own nonprofit organization to do that work, which propelled me into the national kind of space.
Starting your own organization. Wow, you talk about, dynamic, you talk about also, again, I didn't realize amongst royalty, a former president of an organization and all the different things that are kind of going on there. So I understand also now that in your new role, you have a new role.
I do.
Also with Curriculum Associates, I believe. And tell me, your background with assessment and working with now, wanting to partner with Curriculum Associates. I mean, how does that work for a person that really grows up in the assessment world? And
Sure. No, it's a fair question. So currently I am Vice President of Strategic Partnerships. And so what that does is it allows me to do a couple of things, really to raise awareness around the importance of having assessment conversations, how we can help inform the process, help inform, the students, the teachers, everyone who's working so hard to try and make a positive impact on the performance of students. And so raising awareness around the importance of assessment is one thing, but also partnering with organizations that support the leaders who are ultimately in charge of all that goes into the programs, the instruction, the ensuring equitable environments, all of that they have to kind of carry that down and ultimately bear the burden of the success of the schools. And so my work in partnerships gives me the opportunity to do that work also. So equity is a personal kind of passion of mine that really ignited during my national nonprofit work, where I had an opportunity to have conversations around how we can diversify the leadership pipeline, invite more, more female leaders, more leaders of color, and really help that result in a mirrored conversation around the needs of our underrepresented, student populations.
Well, it's interesting you say it that way because, equity, access, diversity, very important. I was also, I was able to be part of the ALAS Association and happened to be part of the Superintendent Leadership Academy, Cohort 8. The grade 8 is what they called us, So
I do believe that was the best one.
So Dr. Alex Marrero, who is now
Yes.
I believe the president there at ALAS,
Indeed.
and I believe you went to to ALAS this past weekend. So were you able to have those conversations?
Yes.
And again, in speaking, I know, and I don't want to focus just on assessment, simply because you had many hats
Yes.
in that. But again, it's equity, it's access, it's diversity, it's advocacy
Mm-hmm.
for our students. So how does a person in your role, or when you talk about those things, and coming from a perspective
Mm-hmm.
of curriculum,
Sure.
of assessment, of instruction, bridging that gap from, like you said, the state to the national, but really
Sure.
more important for just having those conversations.
Yeah, so number of things kind of come to mind, really. So Curriculum Associates is a partner of ALAS, which is the Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents. And so that work is dedicated to lifting up leaders of Latino and leaders of color in general, to get more leaders of color in those top level positions, to help inform the needs of our Latino students to ensure equity. And so that gives us an opportunity to really just inspire one another to kind of lead that charge and really just empower people to take their place, right? I mean, we have, we didn't come from a privileged background. I certainly did not, but until recent years didn't realize that I do certainly have privilege now, and that is how can we be of better support and service to our students, and especially those who need us most. Our students of color, our special education students, our students who are furthest behind, that are now even further behind because of the impacts of the pandemic. And so that's what really kind of allowed me to kind of heed this call to do that work in equity and ensuring equity for our leaders and our students, to Curriculum Associates, where we can see how can we leverage our resources and our privilege and opportunities to those conversations.
No, and I applaud those efforts, because again, it's a lot of those things again, and being able to take that step of faith, that leap of faith from like, okay, I'm leaving public education and going into something that's different, but go back and we know that we have beginning teachers.
Yes.
We have a beginning administrators, and again, you're talking about the world of assessment, which is your wheelhouse.
That's right.
So to speak. Pitch that into me and I'll hit it out of the park. So what words of advice would you have? Because you mentioned again about leveraging data, about leveraging instruction. What words of advice would you give to a beginning administrator on being able to leverage that data and how to use that data to really target instruction?
So, and I think that my advice would probably be to just ask a lot of questions, right? Surround yourself with people who have been in your shoes, and are willing to lend a hand to help inform your journey. I've been very, very fortunate to have a number of very strong leaders who have helped kind of light my path. And so as a formal assessment kind of coordinator, right, in charge of the logistics, the daily grind of assessment, which is kind of a thankless job sometimes. It's really just a lot of ensuring that all the pieces are in place, ensuring that teachers are prepared to put students in the best position possible to be successful. But that's the tail end of it, right? That's like how to getting ready for the actual day. There's an entire conversation, that is taking place day after day around how we can adjust our course and pivot to get students back on track. And so that's where assessment and data is where I can really kind of get into. I'll nerd out on all that stuff to say, okay.
We want you to nerd out a little bit, and it's okay.
So how do to be able to dive into data, and data isn't like always the funnest thing. It's not the most interesting thing. It's not. But more and more, it's becoming a very integral part of the process and top of mind for leaders across the country. And that's like from your local state level, where I've lived for almost 20 years, to conversations at the state level around how we can kind of use that data to inform policies but really to be able to, at all those levels, connect the pieces, right? I mean, my primary responsibility is for my flags to go up at the right time. How I can connect people with information. Connect them with resources that will inform their decision making. But on the front line, like brand new testing person or even a seasoned testing person, they're looking for ways to lighten their load, right? My whole work with the nonprofit organization, and even in Texas with TSNAP, the job is to share best practices, to create a network where we can support one another. And a lot of that is how to make it easiest, how to make it the least time consuming as possible, so that you can dedicate or reallocate that time to what really matters, and that's spending time with kids. So the beauty of assessment and Curriculum Associates, which is, again, the big draw for me, is Curriculum Associates is my worlds beautifully coming together in a very unexpected way. My work with equity coming together with the power of assessment. And so for the work here is what really struck me, like in the biggest way for curriculum associates and iReady in particular, is the power of data, is that the bridge of instruction and assessment, which is what people look for most, is how can I use this data to inform my instruction? And I think where the real kind of power lives with iReady is just the fact that they've heard everything that we were asking for from the front line. Is like, I need it to come out as easy as possible. First of all, just make it easy for me to use without me thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just tell me what I need to know. How can I help my kids and help direct me to what I need to make it all possible? And so we want data to be easily accessible, to be actionable, and be impactful. And iReady is doing that very seamlessly for us and for teachers on the front line to save them time. They don't have to figure out, how to kind of individualize instruction. It's all a personalized experience that's automated by process, making it incredibly easy for them so that they can intervene, they can plan, they can coordinate, and they have the resources at hand to be able to intervene in a very simple way. And so it's kind of lightening the burden, which for me has always been what it's about, is how can we help people, and that's to lighten their load.
So it seems like from what you're saying there too, because of our high quality instructional materials, that iReady has already kind of laid that groundwork to saying, hey, not only are we intentional in what we're doing, we're providing you other
Absolutely.
accesses to be able to do that. But also, which is what you were talking about, when you were that assessment coordinator, how can we make this easier for teachers? How can we do those things to ensure that our students, we really know how to dig down, and we really know how to dig deep? So again, in your experience with this, so again, taking an assessment for just to see if they passed versus taking an assessment to ensure that there's growth.
Sure.
How do you have those conversations with, again, those that are in the grunt of the work, not necessarily your administrators, but with your teacher saying, hey, I get it. Yes, they did well, but here's what I need you to focus on.
Yeah, and I think so it's really to make the data meaningful, right? Like, how does it make sense to me? I don't, and I'm a research person kind of by training, right? And so the work and the research that on one note that curriculum associates intentionally puts into informing the products is extraordinary. That taking the time to be able to study the performance of millions of students to be able to inform something like growth, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But I think really what we want to do is to help teachers make the connections that really matter, and that is connecting instruction to assessment, and assessment ultimately to accountability, which was kind of just a bonus thing. I was in charge of assessment and accountability, so I kind of had that that mindset always kind of in the back of my mind, is how is this going to help us inform the instruction for students, because that's what matters most. But as leaders, we're always concerned with ultimate performance, because that's what we're held accountable for. And so connecting those kind of dots in a very seamless way is what I think is really the greatest kind of gift that iReady brings, because the connection to assessment and instruction is very close and well knit, and it's very intentional in design. And so it's going to give you those answers in a very quick and actionable way, like I mentioned, and make it easy for you to intervene instructionally for maximum return and impact. Now, talk about growth. My accountability flags go up.
I love that.
Right?
I was going to say, okay, talk about
So
accountability.
my accountability, flag goes up, because I'm like, growth is a big part of Texas's accountability system. And so being a Texas native, this is kind of where I kind of really get excited. Where very few, by the way, get excited, but my fellow testing folks out there understand where you can say, okay, tell me about progress, because in the end, the majority of students, by structure and organization of the accountability system, rely on growth, right? Growth ties to accountability progress, right? The same thing. Did the student make the expected amount of growth that they needed to demonstrate mastery, right, of the year? And so typical growth is exactly that, is did they meet the expected kind of growth over 1 year? And that would give you the typical growth. That would give you a point in accountability. Yes, you met growth. But there's always kind of conversations around, did they exceed progress? Did they do more than was expected in a typical year? And that kind of is paralleling more to where I internalize as stretch growth. And so typical growth is what we expect automatically. Right. Stretch growth is a concept I think is unique
we go above and beyond.
Unique to iReady, and into where they take this kind of concept of saying, how could we help encourage, empower, enhance, the experience for students who are capable of more. And so it's a matter of like really intentionally taking data from millions of students to determine what, different growth trends and patterns, and apply those to the system by automation to say, are you capable of more? And if you're on a faster pace, and you show extraordinary progress, then you will meet what we're calling stretch growth, and that allows you to recover and accelerate your instruction at a far greater rate. So it's intentional by design to help you recover at a faster pace, sometimes double the expected growth. And for a child who is struggling, 2 and 3 grade levels behind, that's the goal, is to how can I get them to back on grade level and beyond in the quickest way possible. So the idea of typical growth and stretch growth is just a matter of how can we reasonably really provide a high quality educational experience, and in a way that's going to allow these students that are furthest and need the most support to meet their full potential.
Well, and I think that's very important, because nothing is more important, and that's what you're talking about. Nothing is more important than what happens in the classroom. So as we talk about accountability, because that's one of those things that we really want to focus on, because again, you mentioned those students that are struggling. You also mentioned those students that are really excelling. So again, as a parent, if my child is a gifted student, I don't want you to teach him to the middle. I want him to teach him where he is and excel him that 1 year.
Absolutely.
If they're under, at the middle, if they're where they're supposed to be, we want to at least maintain where they are, and bring everybody up. So as you're looking at accountability, as you're looking at now those subpopulations, now that we're calling super groups,
right?
How is the impact of accountability with those super groups going to impact a change or a shift in education with our students, with our campuses?
Well, I think that's going to be. That's probably a whole different conversation for a whole different day, but let's focus on how we can help, right? Yeah. And so I think really it's just is really trying to really just maximize a personalized learning experience, right? The work of iReady is going to put students on a path toward personalized instruction. And when you are personalizing instruction, then you are absolutely going to kind of take the steps necessary to get the maximum potential for that student. And so with everything that you're doing instructionally and guiding with assessment, which is the whole purpose of iReady, is informing instruction the entire time. If an intervention is necessary, how do I intervene? Giving you the tools very, very easily, the power of subgrouping, your classroom, so that you don't have to think about that, the interventions, the resources that you need to intervene. And so really guiding around that personalized kind of process. But it's always about meeting kids where they are. So whether they're on grade level or 2 and 3 grade levels behind, it's about meeting them where they are, expecting that typical growth, and then demanding whatever potential they have, right? And sometimes that's pushing you out of your comfort zone, but it's always attainable. And like I said, it's based on tons of research with millions of kids to determine what those growth trends were in order to make them realistic and attainable for students.
Oh, I love the research proven aspect about it, because that's very important. And as you look at it now, so again, I sit here with what I call a trendsetter, someone that stepped out of her comfort zone and started an organization, and then went into the national level and doing those different things. And as you have seen assessment and accountability when you started, and as you see where assessment and accountability is now, and in the work with it you're doing, where do you see accountability going and the assessments with it in terms of today's testing world?
I don't know that I can fairly say I confidently know where it's headed. I can tell you that there's always conversations around how to make it as fair and equitable as possible. And I think there's a lot of efforts and conversations around that to try and impose just that. And all states, Texas included, are looking toward how we can kind of ensure that the systems parallel one another, right? Instruction is tied to assessment, and assessment is tied to accountability, and make all that kind of seamless in a routine type of way. A lot of conversations around progress monitoring and being able to help support students help inform instruction along the way. Taking one test one time per year, we all knew that didn't work because the data came out way too late, no opportunity to intervene or maximize the potential impact of intervention. Now we're assessing, throughout the course of the year. iReady's beginning, middle, end of the year assessments allow you to be able to kind of keep a pulse on the progress of a student to ensure that they're successful at the ultimate kind of end of the year assessment. But it's really just kind of a hope that we will all try to help get involved in these conversations around equity to ensure that processes are informed and we empower people with information to help make those ultimate to make those decisions around policy, accountability included.
I like the fact that you're talking about having those conversations. A couple more questions, and then we'll be done if that's okay with you.
Of course.
You know, we've talked about student-led instruction. We've talked about teachers focusing on students. We've talked about administrators, you know, how they can impact instruction. But tell me and of course we know this, and it's almost like a question that we shouldn't, but when you talk about parent involvement,
Sure.
and you talk about parent engagement and those conversations that we should be having with our parents around accountability, around assessment, and around stretch growth,
Sure.
around ensuring that, hey, it's not just from the school side. Because when I grew up, my parents would say, whatever your teachers say, that's what it needs to be.
Yes.
And they didn't have the forethought, or they didn't have the background to say,
Sure.
this is what you need to be doing. You know, I think so much now with social media, with a lot of the things that are going on, so a lot more parents are getting information, sometimes not information that we want them to have,
Right.
or need to have, or whatever the case is. But as you have those conversations, you know what? It's important for that you be part of this conversation with your child.
So, well, much like what we want for our teachers, right? We want them to be empowered with good information, right? Accurate information, actionable information. And so for parents, you know, I think the communication is going to be key, right? We want in everything, we want at every level, but especially with parents, is to involve them, to be transparent, and to communicate. And so when we're exploring something new, a policy or a new assessment or a new program, an intervention, whatever it is, it's important to involve parents in that process, right? When you involve them in that process, first of all, they're engaged and they're part of the process, and so they're gonna support you in that work. And so when it comes time to difficult situations, then they're gonna be on board, and they're part of the team, if you will. And so involving all of your stakeholders, but
Very
parents included, it's important to involve them in the process so that they're empowered with the information that they need to make their decisions and to support the work.
A lot of great conversations that we've had today. So in closing today, as we talk about these conversations, because again, started in the classroom, went into assessment and accountability, started your own organization and national platform now, and having those conversations. So if you were to say, okay, in 3 years, this is what's going to be happening with what Elda Garcia, Dr. Elda Garcia is doing with Curriculum Associates, with instruction, and with the impact on education. In 3 years, this is what's you're going to be seeing.
I think in 3 years, I am very hopeful that within Curriculum within Curriculum Associates, that we will be in an unmatchable position when it comes to supporting like our Latino communities and students, because there's a lot of work and effort going into creating our Spanish products and being able to ensure that we have, you know, parity between English and Spanish to help support those that are most in need, that are often our bilingual and multilingual students, and more that nationally trying, you know, prioritizing from the Secretary of Education, you know, Secretary Cardona, you know, emphasizing biliteracy and making, you know, multilingualism, you know, a superpower. It's important to ensure that we're meeting the multilingual needs of our students, and Curriculum Associates is blazing the trail when it comes to that. So I'm very, very hopeful that we will absolutely have, you know, just unparalleled kind of like support for our Spanish-speaking populations.
I'm very excited to hear about the things and the goals that you have out there. And I love the word that you said, that superpower of being bilingual. So again, very excited to visit today with Dr. Elda Garcia. Wish you the best of luck in everything that's going on with you, and highlight a lot of the successes that are going on. So we really appreciate the why of what you're doing. So thank you again for joining us today. And if you want more information about what Dr. Garcia is doing in her work with Curriculum Associates or with assessment, come on to the website at www.curriculumassociates.com and see what's going on. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Rick. They're exciting times, and I'm just thrilled to be part of the process and part of the journey.
Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.